So here we are. Wayne is laying in the streets. He's been shot several times and he's bleeding out. The ambulance is on the way. The police are on the way. But he's laying there. And while he's laying there in the streets, he sees, scenes of his life flashing before his eyes. People say that all the time when somebody's about to die, that they have memories that come into their minds about their life and all of these types of things. But Wayne, he's seeing, his childhood, and it's a big gap. It's a big gap between when he was a child and to now. Yeah, he sees pictures in his mind of what his father looks like and what his mother would look like before she was an addict. And he sees his grandmother, and he's laying there bleeding, tears rolling down the side of his face. And he smiles and he feels comforted by the the images that he's seeing in his mind. And the ambulance gets there and they grab him and they put him up on the gurney, and they got him on the gurney and they're administering CPR to him and all this and that, right? And the whole time he's laying there, he's starting to slip away. So they say his heartbeat is stopping. So they put the gear on him, how they put the stuff on you and say, clear. And they hit him. They hit him again. They get him in the back of the ambulance, and then they call it in, and they're en route to the hospital, and they're flying. They're getting there fast. In the meantime, the police are securing the area. They're securing the area, and they're getting the spent rounds off the ground and putting the crime scene tape up, and they're marking where all of the bullets were at and marking the area where Wayne's body was at. And all of these things are going on so fast that it's almost like nobody really understands that in this area, nobody really understands that another person is dying. It's like life as usual. Nothing is stopping to pay attention to this moment. Nothing and nobody. Yeah, they looked. Yeah, they were concerned. But then they kept moving on. As if he didn't matter. As if he had never existed. And now they get him to the hospital, and then they rush him into surgery. And when they get him into surgery, they remove the bullets. And now he's in intensive care. And it's touch and go for a while. They don't know if he's going to make it. They're not sure if he's going to be able to survive what just happened to him. He's badly beaten up. His body has holes everywhere that they stitched up. And the doctors are talking on the side, and they're like, is there anybody that we could call? Is any family, anybody? Nobody has an answer for that. And the doctors are frustrated because they've seen this before. Too many times. Too many times. And then the nurse comes in. And this particular nurse, she remembers this child. She remembers this child. This is the child of the woman, which was his mother, that she told to get it together. So the nurse, she offers up what she knows about him. And she's starting to tell his story, how his father died of an overdose, how his mother was in the hospital at one time from that overdose, got her life together, and then she was supposedly killed, but she wasn't sure because the situation, the case fell apart. So she's telling these doctors this situation, and they're all standing around. And while they're standing around talking about Wayne's situation, all of a sudden, they get a call. Another shooting has occurred. So they have to hurry off and go take care of that situation. It's almost as if nobody stops to take a moment to recognize what is happening to Wayne. Nobody is reflecting on what is really going on in our neighborhoods. Another man is laying on the bed. Another human being is laying in a bed and he may not make it. But that's not what's going to happen, y'all. It's not what's going to happen. Wayne makes it. After several weeks of being in the intensive care, he's finally moved into the recovery. And he's stable. And they think he's going to be all right. It's going to be a long road ahead of him, but they think he's going to be all right. Now, while he's been laying in the hospital, the dean of the college that he goes to comes to visit, comes to the hospital because he sees a surprisingly intelligent, talented young man that he's pulling for. But he knows that Wayne doesn't have anybody. He doesn't have anybody. So he makes it his business to come, just so somebody will be there. And he sits there in the room and he watches Wayne, monitors him, just so he would have somebody there. Just so somebody would be there, because he has nobody. And while he's sitting there one day, Wayne opens his eyes. And when he opens his eyes, he sees the dean. But he doesn't recognize who the dean is. He's seen him maybe once or twice. And he looks over there at him, but he doesn't say anything. He got tubes all down his throat, all down his nose. He can't talk. So the dean stands up and he looks at him and he summons for the nurse to come into the room. And when the nurse comes into the room, they check him out and make sure he's okay. They call the doctor. The doctor comes in to check him out and he talks to him. He says, "You pulled through. We didn't think you were going to make it." And Wayne looks up at him. He can't even smile. He's got so much tape and tubes all up in his nose and in his mouth. He can't even say anything. But he looks at the doctor and he nods his head weakly, real slow and subtle, because he could barely move. His body was weak. So while he's laying there, the doctor continues to do his examination. And once he finishes up, he walks out of the room and he says, "I'll be back later to check on you." And he taps him on his hand, comforting him. Now everybody knows Wayne's story, that he's all alone. And the dean tells him that when you get out of here, we're waiting on you. Come back to the school. And Wayne looks at him and nods his head again, affirming that he's coming back to school. So after a few more minutes, the dean, he leaves and goes home. And Wayne is in this room all alone. And the nurse comes into the room. The nurse that had talked to his mother and told his mother to get it together. And the nurse tells him, said, "I know you. I know you." See, it turns out that the nurse, when she told his mother, Wayne's mother, to get it together, that this particular nurse, she took an interest in him and she had been keeping up with him to see what he was doing, especially after Wayne's mother was found dead. So she's been monitoring him. So she tells him all about it. He's laying there, but he can't respond. So she's talking to him and she tells him, she said, "You special. You are somebody. And you're going to make it." And she said, "Don't you take none of this with you." She said, "I know you might be angry now, you might be scared, but she said, don't you take none of that with you. None of that with you." She said, "You're going to get through this, and you're going to be a better person for this." And she told him, she said, "You know, when I said the things that I said to your mother, telling her that she was selfish, she said, I did it because I wanted her to get it together. But she said, I might have done it the wrong way, but my intentions were good." And she said, "But I'm going to tell you something. Your mother was a strong woman, and she tried. But this lifestyle that a lot of our people indulge in sometimes is too strong for them." But she said, "It's not too strong for you. It's not too strong for you. It's not going to get you. I'm not going to let it." So he lay there and he's listening to her, and she sees the tear roll down the side of his face. And she reaches over And she wipes the tear away. And she tells him, you're not going to be alone. I'm going to be there to help you. I'm going to fill the gap for you. So when you get out of here, you can call on me. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. So after a few more weeks, the detectives come down. And they're talking to him. And by now, they've taken the tubes out of his mouth and his nose, and he's talking on his own, even though he's still weak. And they ask him about what went on, and he tells them the truth. He tells them the truth. But he also tells them, surprisingly, that he's not upset with the drug dealer's son. He sees the drug dealer's son as a victim too. But he understands that the police, they got a job to do. Because just because he sees him as a victim as well, doesn't mean that he's not a dangerous person. Because you got to understand some people. Excuse me. Anybody that has that amount of anger in them, even though they may be a victim of circumstance, they need to be apprehended. Because if he'll kill somebody, try to kill somebody in the streets, have somebody killed by overdosing with drugs, this person needs to be apprehended. So when they explained that to Wayne, Wayne said he understood. And so he told them everything that he knew. And he assured them that he would be there to testify. And when the time came, he did. Wayne got out of the hospital. He was doing fine. He's back in school. And the trial came up. And then when he got to the trial, after they set him on the stand and he testified to what happened and he laid out the story the way he wanted to lay it out, the DA was indulging him and letting him tell the story how he wanted to tell it. And when everything was done, Wayne asked, could he have something to say? And the DA resisted. He told him, no, not now. So the judge says, I'll allow it. So Wayne, this is before guilty or innocent had come back. They hadn't even given it to the jury yet. Wayne looks right at the drug dealer's son and he tells him, I forgive you, man. He said, I understand everything that happened to you. But he said, what you forgot is that everything that happened to you happened to me too. I had nothing to do with what went on with your father and my father. I had nothing to do with that. But you took my mother away from me. And my grandmother died, the last person that I had. And then you tried to kill me. The DA sat there and leaned back in the chair. The defense attorney leaned back in the chair. The courtroom was silent. And he told him, he said, I forgive you though, man. He said, whatever they do to you, meaning the jury and the DA and the judge and all, whatever they do, they do. But you need to know I forgive you. I have no ill will towards you, man. And I hope that you get it together. So the drug dealer's son, he sat there at the table and he's looking at him. And at the beginning of Wayne's speech, he's looking at him. He's got this mean mug on. Y'all know what I'm talking about. How you looking, that you're trying to look like it's not affecting you. Ain't nothing bothering you. You're this hardcore person. But over the course of this speech, his face is softened up. You know what I'm talking about? His words were getting through. So the drug dealer's son, he sat there and he's looking at him and he bows his head. And Wayne tells him, look, man, don't do that. You did what you did, but it's going to be all right. He said, it's going to be all right. And the drug dealer sat there and he looked at him. He raised his head back up and he looked at him and he nodded at Wayne. Just nodded, a little slight nod. And the jury saw that. And when they looked at the drug dealer, they saw remorse in his face. They saw it. So when Wayne was finished giving his speech, they went through all the procedures and things that they have to go through, and the final arguments from the DA and the final arguments from the defense, and then the judge gave the case to the jury. And when he gave the case to the jury, it didn't take them long at all. A couple of hours, they came back, and they found the drug dealer's son guilty. But when it came time for the sentencing, the judge considered what Wayne had said. Wayne asked the judge for leniency. He said, I'm not afraid of this man. Yes, he has to pay for what he did, but don't take him forever. The judge took that into consideration, understanding the whole story, everything, the backstory to this whole drama that played out between these two kids, because that's what they were when they started. And he sentenced the drug dealer's son to 20 years in the penitentiary. And I shared this story with you because I want you to understand that most of the time, people don't really understand all the things that have to take place to create a perfect storm. Because that's what happened in this case, and it happens in so many other cases in so many different ways. The perfect storm will create a monster, but it creates victims at the same time. And that's what happened here. So take that into consideration when you hear about these stories about people doing this and people doing that and people being hurt by these individuals and so on and so forth. Remember one thing: hurt people hurt people. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.